In this video, we have the Redcat Ascent-18. We're going to continue the upgrade series on it with an aluminum center skid plate, brass front links, a brass servo mount, and aluminum rear links. Now, in this situation, Redcat offers a variety of options for you. You can do brass links all front and rear, aluminum all front and rear, and they have them in both a red and a bronze kind of color if you want those aluminum ones. Similarly, with the servo mount, you can also get this in aluminum. Similarly with the center skid, you can get that in brass. But my thought here and my strategy with my vehicles is I like crawlers to have all the weight in the front. Hence putting the servo mount in the front, putting the brass links in the front, putting the aluminum skid in the center instead of the brass because of how this truck is designed. That's kind of center line. I want more of my weight up here in the front. And again, similar with these rear links, I want those aluminum because I want those lightweight back here. You may ask, why do you even want brass or aluminum links in the first place? And I'll show you that this truck has, I think, kind of similar to when I used the SCX-24 before. The rear links especially are kind of flimsy. When you're here, you can just flex them. All right, and when the truck's new, not really a problem. You know, not pushing a lot of weight, not going over anything too crazy. Maybe it doesn't really matter. But as that truck ages and as these links get a little bit weaker, you'll actually find situations where you're crawling and this rear axle will warp up a little bit because it'll push and kind of bind that up. So I do believe, based on the factory design here, you're probably going to want to put either the aluminum or brass, depending on your design and your strategy with your vehicle. You're probably going to want to put those on this truck eventually. They offer all of these. They're relatively cheap, so you can grab them and put them on as you want. To put all these parts on is going to be a pretty deep dive in this truck, so I'm going to go ahead and get the body off and the wheels and tires off as we get started. We're going to start this mod then by taking these 4 screws off. That's going to separate this center skid from the transmission and motor assembly. And then we're going to have to take these side screws off of the side skids here in order to get to the link mounts and center skid mounts so we can drop this whole center skid out of the truck. With those side skids off, there's now 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that are down here that help hold this center skid and the links all together. I'm going to note that those were in the lower mount positions here. These 2 screws were in that lower position. It looks like this is just an alternate location where you can mount that inboard control arm, but we're probably going to want to leave it in the bottom spot. Now's when we start to really get into some fun here because everything's starting to get a little squirrely on us because there's a lot of the structure is now gone out of the truck. We're going to go ahead and get the upper rear links off because we can swap them over. Okay, and those upper links can slide out. This bag of rear links looks like they're all the same size. Always a good idea to match up and just double check yourself as you're putting stuff together. It does come with the little ball ends that you'll need here. As you put the little ball ends in, it also comes with little rubber O-rings that you can put around the ends there. And that helps center everything and give it a little bit of cushion. Just like that. You put those in both ends and then we will mount them back onto the rear. Upper links are now back on, and so then we're going to take off these 2 screws, 1, 2 on each side here, and that's going to start to free up those lower links. And the same thing on the front here, 2 more screws, and that gets the lower links out. To get to these rear link screws, it looks like we got to go through the bottom shock shaft. So we're going to pop these lower ball ends off, and then a 1.5mm driver. And we have that piece off. That link will then come out and we can replace it with one of those rear links that we had assembled earlier. And here we are, aluminum part versus the factory plastic. looks to be the same, has the alternate mounting holes there if you want to raise your links. Again, this is also offered in brass if you would rather have yours in brass. I am going with the aluminum. Honestly, I don't know if there's really anything wrong with the plastic one, but it's going to look fun, and we all like fancy aluminum shiny bits. Now, I want you to note, it is sided. The center skid is not symmetrical front and rear. You'll find it out really fast, because if you flip it around, it won't line up. So there is only one way that center skid will bolt on, and we're just going to reuse the factory hardware. For this step, these outer rear links go back on the inside of this rear skid plate here. Now we are going to be putting a metal screw into an aluminum tray, so you're going to want to make sure that you have some blue thread locker. I can leave a link down in the video description to use that. Any kind of metal on metal, that's what you want to use. Yeah, slowly coming together now. Check that out. We actually need to get these lower links from the front. We need to get them mounted up. So now it's time for us to grab our brass links and go ahead and assemble those. These assemble just like those rear links did. Beautiful brass pieces here. The little ball end goes in, a little bit of rubber on each side. There is a short and a long, and the long is the one that we're wanting for these bottom links. And now the front lower links are installed. We're going to flip this over and get the transmission mount here back in. We can go ahead and tidy up the whole rear of the truck too before we move on to those front upper links and the servo mount. It's almost starting to look like a truck again. The center transmission mount here has just the two center bolts in it on either side. Now we can get these outer links put in, the upper links where they go here to the outside. Again, we're going to want to put them in that lower hole, mimicking how it was before, and we're going to be putting thread locker on both of those, and then the rear is actually going to be all buttoned up. Well, doesn't that just look fancy with that skid there and both of that? It kind of makes me want to wish I was doing the red on the front too, because man, that looks good. With how thick these are, I was concerned that there might be some binding right here as the suspension flexes, but it doesn't. It gets close, but it doesn't actually touch. But if you are using these long term, and if you do some crazy kind of different suspension mounting, you might want to just pay attention to that, because it does get super duper close there as you flex that rear suspension. Whole rear end is now buttoned up. We got to get to these other links here on the front, but those links are also part of the servo mount. They're actually attached to the servo mount. So what we need to do now is come in here. There's one screw there on either. There's one screw that'll take the links out, but then we're also going to take this. It's actually the screw that goes through the front diff cover. We're going to take it off, and the two servo the two servo mounting screws. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4 here, and then the servo along with the servo mount and these links will all come off. The old mount versus the new mount with that brass piece on it, looking really nice there. Now, if you've watched my other videos of this truck, you know that I've actually ground down the edges of this factory mount in order to help with clearance on the front of the truck. This brass one, of course, is still the factory design. So I'm going to take this over before I mount it, and I'm going to grind those edges off of this servo mount as well to help with clearance. Servo mount is on. Looking beautiful, fits like a glove, so that is nice. Now we just have these last two links to put on, these upper brass links on the front here. They mount in that, come back here, mount in these lower holes through the side skid like we had them before. Well, now that's just looking awesome now, isn't it? That aluminum in the rear, the brass in the front. That's pretty cool. Definitely makes the truck look a whole lot nicer. I still need to get the rest of the side skids on here, and then I want to get the tires and wheels on and weigh this thing and see what that front rear weight balance is now with these changes that we made. Tires and wheels back on it, center skids in it, the little 2S LiPo that I've been using in this truck back in it. And now here we are, just under 500 total grams, 62% front, 38% rear weight bias, 300 grams on those front tires. Next steps for me is I need to get this back outside. It's been raining here. I haven't really been able to drive it outside. Time for me to get it back outside on my crawler course and see just how good it does. So stay tuned for that video. If you have any questions about the parts that I put on here today, leave them down in the video comments below and I'll be happy to answer that. If you want to see other things that I've done with this Redcat Ascent-18, there's a pop-up playlist coming up right over here to your right. I hope to see you in one of those videos. Thank you and goodbye.